I had a 17-year career in financial services, worked my way up the chain, got to a fairly decent senior management level, and 2013, my life changed really. So I ended up in hospital for 5 months, completely unexpectedly. I had pancreatitis. My little girl was 3 weeks old at the time. My lad was only 2. Fortunately, walked away from that, and it was a real trigger to think, as to what am I doing? This is it. I'm doing property now. I had a finite amount of time to graft. Our investment area was Wales,
Right.
from where we lived. So every other weekend I was there. I was knocking out 10 to 15 viewings a week. On a Saturday, we bought 4 properties in 14 months. There was talks of the company being split up and sold off, and I got paid to go. So the universe, whatever you want to call it, was all aligning, and it was kind of meant to be.
Would you say you manifested that?
Back, probably.
Yeah.
I was doing it.
In this week's episode of the Investors Corner, we're joined by Milesh Lakhani, who is a property investor and has been for a number of years. Now, we'll speak to Milesh about what his personal journey has been like and what type of investments he started his property investing career on and how he's evolved that going through the years. What strategy does he use? What's he focus on more? What relationship does he have with the agent that he uses to manage his properties? And his golden tips on how to make property investing work for you. So make sure that you listen into this one. There is absolute gold dust within this and use of information that you can take away to make informed decisions yourself. So if you like this one, make sure that you hit the subscribe button to listen to the Investors Corner podcast. Milesh, thank you for joining us today. Really excited to have you on. I know you got a bit of a story, and you're into property investing yourself. So I'm excited for me and Ian to be here with you. I'm excited for our listeners as well to learn from you. But the first thing that I want to ask, Milesh, is just give us a bit of a story about you. What do you do? Your sort of transition into property investing and how that happened, really.
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me, guys. Great to meet you both. So yeah, where do I start? I'll start from the start, I think. So I had a 17-year career in financial services, worked my way up the chain, got to a fairly decent senior management level, and 2013, my life changed really. So I ended up in hospital for 5 months, completely unexpectedly. I had pancreatitis. Bit of context, my little girl was 3 weeks old at the time. My lad was only 2. Fortunately, walked away from that 5 months in. I was an outpatient for about 3 years after that. And it was a real trigger to think, as to what am I doing? I had a couple of buy-to-lets at that point already. It was one of those things where I invested when you could self-certify mortgages. So it was really easy to get in. Thought, this is quite cool, could do a bit more of this, and then kind of career gets in the way, life gets in the way, and then it's kind of parked. Right? So having come out of hospital, I thought, right, how do I get time, flexibility, and more time with my family, essentially? And looked into property and thought, actually, I could probably craft a career out of this that gives me what I want from it, as well as obviously the income. So initially, it was just about getting out of the job. And so built up some knowledge and started buying HMOs. That was my kind of route in, if you like.
Did you have a big kind of business plan, strategy plan, finance planning from your background where you went, right, this is the niche area that I'm going to focus in, be it in this case HMOs, or was it kind of you knew that from the outset, or was it there was a bit of maths involved in it somewhere? How did that come about?
A bit of all of that, actually. So yeah, with my analytical background, my wife's a data geek. So we literally said, right, what are we spending now? What do we need to survive? Not what we're earning. What do we need to survive? And then how do we get there? And based on that plan, we'll determine what property strategy we then go with. So it's quite calculated around, timescale for me to get out of the job and what that looks like. So I'd put a plan in place to leave at a certain point. Worked out how many properties we would need. HMO at the time was, and still is, better cash flow than buy-to-lets. So rather than 20 to 30 buy-to-lets, actually 4 or 5 HMOs would give me the same outcomes. Because I had a couple of buy-to-lets already, that stood me in better stead to go straight into HMOs because I had the experience as far as a lender's concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So the barrier to entry was reduced for me. And so that's what I did, and just picked an area and literally went for it.
Yeah, it's good because we talk often about stories and the goals and the targets. In this case, your target was to, from a monthly cash flow perspective, get away from the career and make this the career effectively. That was the ultimate goal here, which is where the HMO kicked in and made sense.
Yeah, exactly. And since then the strategy's changed, and it's always critical to review where you're at and where you're heading. But yeah, it's driven very much around what we want out of life in terms of that financial. Is it a monthly? Is it a lump of cash or lumps of cash? And then we pick the right strategy that is going to achieve that for us, rather than go, I've got a bit of money, got a bit of time, let's get into property, without that direction.
Yeah. Was it your life event, being in hospital and going through that whole, journey with you that you decided at that point to say, right, let's just go and get it done? Or was it something that you were thinking about before and you were just going to transition to being in full-time property?
It was definitely the first. It was that trigger, that life experience that I got, that I walked away from, luckily, that triggered the change. Because like I said, time, flexibility, family are my key values, and that's what I kind of work to. And property was the vehicle that allowed me to operate a business off the back of it, really. So it was initially get me out of the job. Next thing was to get my wife out of the job. Then it was about, okay, I want to build up pots of cash now. And we've just kind of stuck to that.
How did you get out of the job, and how long did that take? How many assets, how many properties did it take for you to get to the point where you're like, right, I can now exit this career?
Great question, and bit of a story. So I'd planned to leave. So I fell ill in 2013, June, came out in November. January 2015, when I was feeling better, I thought, right, this is it. I'm doing property now. Put a plan in place to resign, have my resignation in on Christmas Eve 2016. And then March 2017, leave the job.
Okay.
So I had a finite amount of time to graft.
Yeah.
And by graft, I mean graft.
Yeah. Out of hours as well.
Job. And our investment area was Wales, North Wales, so 4 hours from where we live.
Right.
So every other weekend I was there. I was knocking out 10 to 15 viewings a week on a Saturday, coming back Sunday, running my numbers, offers on the Monday, and that just kept going for about 18 months. We bought 4 properties in 14 months, and in May 2016, so 7 months before I'd planned to resign, there was talks of the company being split up and sold off. Long story short, October 16 I left and I got paid to go. Redundancy.
Worked out well.
So universe, whatever you want to call it, it was all aligning, and it was kind of meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Would you say you manifested that?
Looking back, probably.
Yeah,
I didn't know I was doing it.
Yeah. No,
I didn't know even what that was then.
Yeah. I guess the next logical question that you're probably thinking as well is like, why Wales? Why that location?
It happened by accident, but the numbers worked.
Yeah.
So it was actually one of my family members moved over there, went to visit them, and as you do on Rightmove, had a look at what's going on, and I thought, actually, these rental returns versus your purchase prices are pretty strong. Went away, did some research, looked into the world of HMOs in Wales, and this was at a time where every HMO needed to have planning permission in Wales, which you do need to do here now, once it's above a certain size. But in Wales, anything, whether it's a 3-bed, 4-bed or above, you had to have planning permission. So a lot of people would have seen that as a bit of a barrier, and locally that is what I picked up, is that landlords were just too much red tape, basically. But from my background, actually, if I understood what the rules were, and knew what parameters I was working within, then you just mitigate the risk and just get on with it. So that stood us in really good stead. So the numbers worked. Barrier to entry was easier because people were frightened of getting into it. So I built relationships with the local authority, letting agents, just to understand how it all works. And then started buying.
Yeah. That's nice. It's a good outlook to have that I think sometimes people struggle with. Is you look at something, you identify a problem which puts off 80% of other people, and rather than being in the 80% crowd, you look and go, well, let's be the 20% opportunity, which is what you've done there, which is quite a good way of looking. And I think because property investment or being a landlord it's not popular, but it's a common thing that people talk about. They want to, it's a desire they have. That's normally where people kind of follow the path, the easy path, which doesn't always bring the best returns.
Yeah, and a lot of people I find, certainly more recently, either want to get into it but don't really have that direction, or are in it and they're not really achieving what they wanted to achieve or what they thought they would achieve.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid of saying I bang on about strategy and due diligence to anyone who will listen, because I think it's so critical to get that stuff right and get it right at the start.
Yeah, because that's how you're going to identify a great opportunity, right? Is by doing the numbers, doing the plan. Right, what can I buy this property for? My goal is to hold on to it for the next 10 years. Well, what does that look like? Looking at the data over the past 10 years on what house prices have done, what rental prices are going to do. Because, I mean, rental's pretty easy to determine on what you're going to get. I mean, average inflation, 7 or 8% on rents, even higher in some areas. So you can sort of, determine that over a 10-year period, along with house prices, because you look back at the data. So, yeah, planning and strategy is definitely something that you need to do in order to make it work. And if you did that, then you'll be able to identify those potentially problematic opportunities that turn into a great deal, because no one else is doing that. I've heard it from investors that they're looking for a certain type of property, and those properties never become available, or if they do, they're too expensive. When really, if you look somewhere up north and you can get 4 buy-to-lets and you can pay 75 grand for each one of them, and you can get a return on your rentals at 950 or £1,000 a month, it's like, well, I'd rather go for those 4, because now I've got a bigger portfolio. I'm getting a better returns, better yields in those areas. Might not get as much as capital appreciation as the ones down in southeast, but from a yield point of view, from an income point of view, those 4 make it work better than a 3-bedroom house down here.
Yeah.
It's maths, isn't it? It's like you spoke about. It's maths. Yeah,
exactly that. As long as it's aligned with what you want, and that's the thing. Because what I'm finding at the moment is there's no shortage of information out there, and a lot of it's free. So you can go out and get knowledge. You can get knowledge for nothing, but it's more relevant now that you need to have that plan, that goal, whatever it is, to know what direction you're heading in, because you can go and get the information.
Yeah.
Whereas before, when I started out, knowledge wasn't as freely available as it is today.
Yeah.
So you are paying for knowledge, whereas now I don't feel like you need to pay for that much knowledge, but you need to have that accountability. It can be a lonely game, right? So being around like-minded people, having the right team around you is really, really critical, more so today than it perhaps was previously.
Yeah,
I think you can get the knowledge out there on, you've got YouTube and podcasts and stuff like that, which is great. You probably just need someone that you trust to just bounce a final decision off of, to give you the confidence to do it. But what you speak about with strategy, goals, and obviously the vision of what you were trying to achieve, it's almost like you've got a load of filters which bring 1,000 properties down to 10 because of those filters. It has to fit in that filter of parameters, which also makes it much easier, because often people look at it and, where people inquire, we're buyers just looking for their home, and they say, I want to be in a 25-mile radius of Berkshire, and I'm looking for anything between 500 and 750. And you're like, well, you don't know what you're after. You've got no idea what you're looking for. You are never buying with that. And actually, when you fine-tune it down to the way that you've said that, it works. With the properties, and this may have changed, but when you did acquire them, did you use a letting agent to rent them? Did you do it individually? Has that changed in any way since you've grown the portfolio?
So remote investing essentially is what it is, because they're 4 hours away, and because they're a HMO, so you're renting by room. It was never in the plan for me to manage, and so we just baked that into our numbers and bought accordingly at the price that worked for us, to have a letting agent in place. I've been through a few, let's be honest. Lockdown didn't serve me too well on that front, but now we're with somebody who's amazing, really good.
Is it the same agent for all of them now?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we've increased the portfolio, we've had the same agent, and then we shifted once. We did a commercial conversion to a 20-bed HMO as well. At that point, we went with another agency, and then post-lockdown or during lockdown, we went with another one, and we're happy to stay with them.
Okay. Yeah. So it's hands off for you in terms of the management.
As hands off as it can be. You still need to. We have our own internal controls and systems in place around maintenance, around rental arrears, voids, ongoing management. So we've got a really good process in place with the letting agent where we have weekly calls with them on what's going on, what decisions do we need to make, what's going well, what's not going so well, where are we with our rentals and voids and all that sort of stuff. So that works for both parties because actually it stops random calls coming in. It stops emails willy-nilly going backwards and forwards. You've got that focused half an hour. I think it's probably lasted half an hour once or twice in a few years. So that is a system that we requested, that they've agreed to, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, I mean,
so you do need to manage your managing agent.
Yeah.
And we do spot checks. I'm not going to lie. We're doing a spot check on this property. Let's have all of the gas safety records for the last however long. Let's see all the inspection reports, historic, although we've already seen them. Let's bring them back in. All the right to rent checks, all that stuff that ultimately, as landlords, we're on the hook for.
Yeah.
Just for our own internal purposes, we kind of conduct that.
Yeah, we've done previous podcasts and we did a specific one about open rent as well. When you've got landlords or HMO landlords that do everything themselves, and we see the comments in the forums online about people wanting to use an agent, but then you've got people saying back, look, you don't need to use an agent, don't use them, they're liars, they're this, they're that, they don't do anything, they're a waste of money. But actually what you've just basically said about getting calls in, getting maintenance requests coming in, you bake it into the numbers anyway, so that it's covered. It's just why wouldn't you have a letting agent to do it and let them take care of it? But like you said, still sort of performance manage your managing agent and doing the spot checks, because I've spoken to landlords recently where they're fed up of using their agent and they've brought their portfolio over to us because they're fed up of using that agent because they haven't performed. And when I've asked the question, well, how do you know they haven't performed? And they turn around to me and said, oh, they don't communicate with me on a monthly basis, or I haven't seen a property inspection report for 12 months and all of that sort of stuff. Well, it's like, well, yeah, you still need to check in on your managing agent, or now you're going to be in a situation like this where you've now got to use a different agent. You've got to build up another relationship. I mean, luckily for us, I've built up a good relationship with these clients that have bought their portfolio, and they understand what we do and what our vision is as a managing agent. So they know we're on the right page and they know they're being looked after, and I'll have calls with them to see how their investment is performing. But yeah, it's communication, isn't it? It all comes back to the communication. It's so vital in this game. I'm interested to know about the 20-bed property. Was that on the plan? Was it an opportunity that just arose? Were you looking for something a little bit different to the norm?
So I had buy-to-lets. HMO is like the next kind of step up, if you like. Then it's conversions, and then land and planning gain and all that type of stuff, and new builds and whatever. I was desperate to do flats, desperate to convert into flats. And this property came to me via an agent who I hadn't worked with. I'd done loads of viewings with, but not bought with her. And I used to be relentless with my follow-ups. I used to annoy a lot of agents. Every 2 weeks on a Wednesday, I'm on the phone. What's happened with that deal? How's it progressing? So Bainey, thorn in the sides of a lot of agents, but she came to me and said, would you look at commercial property? Brought it to me, and I said, yeah, always happy to have a look. So it was a commercial unit, 5,000 square foot. It was a offices, Unite building. Couldn't shift it, and I desperately, like I said, wanted to put flats in it. there just wasn't any demand for it. There was no visible demand for studios or 1 beds or 2 beds anywhere.
Was it on an industrial estate or
no high street location?
Oh, wow,
ideal location.
Yeah.
Amenities are really nearby and everything else. Good transport links. So it ticked all the HMO boxes. Plenty of parking, which is another big consideration. And then we had a 6-bed just over the road, so I knew the model worked. Whether I could fill 20 or not, that's where the work was, to try and understand that and whether there's enough demand in the area to warrant that size of property. There was, and then we kind of went ahead with it. So we bought it subject to planning with a really, really low refundable deposit. So risk to me was reduced. So it was a great way of getting into the deal. And then, conversion took probably about 7 months to the 20-bedder. Yeah.
A lot of different red tape hoops to jump through based on that compared to the 6-bed.
Yeah. So previously they were all kind of 3-bed mid-terraces, which we converted into 4-bed HMOs. Set layout, set floor plan, because I knew I could rinse and repeat. 6-bedder was a detached place, so that was again quite straightforward to do. This was completely different. Massive learning curve. Just getting in, getting comfortable with the construction company that I was happy to work with, all the legals and the contracts, and then the ongoing management and oversight of it. The firm we went with were amazing, really, really good, accommodating to the fact that I was so far away. All told, it wasn't a terrible time.
Do it again?
Yeah. No, but only because it doesn't line up with what I want today.
Yeah. Okay.
From a strategy point of view, but definitely.
Yeah, and out of interest, kind of if we look at 2023 as an example, what kind of occupancy percentage have you been sort of experiencing?
So
for the portfolio rather than the individual.
We've been fairly lucky with the 20-bedder because that's the biggest one and therefore the biggest concern. So when we first had it ready, lockdown happened pretty much straight after. So we had a few tenants in, and then they're gradually coming in, but then lockdown happened. So there was some emergency electrical works that needed to be done, which worked out amazing for us because it just got filled up. For the majority of lockdown, as they started filtering out, we started putting tenants in, and then we had the council approach us and wanting to offer guarantors and pay rents and stuff in advance. So that's kind of kept that ticking over, and a lot of them have stayed as well. So we've been pretty fortunate there. We were, for the first time ever, at 100% occupancy for about 3 weeks. But for anyone looking to go into it, never do your numbers on 100% occupancy because it's just not realistic. Typically, we always used to run our numbers on 75 to 80% as a realistic occupancy level consistently for HMOs. You're going to get voids. It's the type of profile of tenant and the type of tenants that you're going to get. They're not all going to stay there forever. So you need to factor that into your numbers when you're buying.
Yeah, makes total sense. And in terms of the vision, the strategy, the goal that you've got now, what does that look like for the future for you, if you don't mind sharing kind of in how that's, if it's pivoted at all or if it's still on the same path?
Yeah, great question. So initially, like I said, for me to get out of the job, that happened. Next thing was to get my wife out of the job. So that happened in lockdown. So she now manages all of our existing portfolio because I don't enjoy that much. So she has the weekly calls with the agents and everything else. Now it's about building up pots of cash. Essentially, over the next 5 years, I want to end up with a big lump of cash and then have some fun with it. Essentially, and still be involved, but in a different way. So we have private lenders who work with us to fund some of our purchases and things. I want to be in that space, having built up knowledge, experience, so that I can help somebody else who's happy to do what I've done to that point, and then work with them from a funding side as well. So that's the ultimate end game, really.
Thank you for watching this podcast. Now, this podcast is actually split into two because the wealth of information that Milesh is giving us. So make sure that next week you listen in to part 2. And if you like what you're hearing for the Investors Corner podcast, then make sure you hit the subscribe button.